You got the distribution call, you got the placement, you did everything right. And somewhere between the purchase order and the shelf, something went sideways. Your product isn't there, or it's there, but it's wrong. Or nobody can tell you either way. Every CPG brand hits this wall, most of them hit it more than once. I'm Jordan Karcher, founder and CEO of Iley. Know Thy Shelf is the show for founders and CPG superstars who are done taking anyone's word for what's happening at the shelf. Real stories, real data, one question underneath all of it. Your product is listed as in stock. Is it though? Matt, it's good to have you here and to share your journey at Everybody Eat, especially since you have so much experience across brands, big and small, from baklava to Lotus Bakeries to Pop Chips to Perfect Bar. You've built and scaled a lot of brands and some very well-known names. You've had a lot of successful exits. You know this space just about as well as anybody I've ever met. When you walk back into your history, can you tell me how you ended up in CPG in the first place?
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. And I appreciate the opportunity to share some of my background and experiences, as well as what has really been valuable to me in CPG. And how I got into it was really, it was a friend of, it was my brother's wife's mother who just needed to scale a brand called Sinbad Sweets, which was a baklava Armenian pastry within the East Coast. They were out of Fresno, and they were really looking for, I think, at the end of it, it's relationships and partners to help fuel their awareness for the product as well as consumers' love for the brand.
And what year was that? So I know you've been in
Yeah,
the
this was in 1998.
okay, 98.
And so it's been a while.
Yeah, well, so what was the world like in 98 in CPG? I mean, I'd love to hear the different
Wow.
youth com
It was who you knew. It
relationship.
was who you knew, really. And healthy was, at least from what I understood, wasn't nearly as important. It was more about how much. How much do you get? It was bulk. What was the value from size? And it wasn't necessarily what was inside the product. And at least that's what I understood, because that was a world that I was in. But once I introduced baklava to a little chain called Fresh Fields, which was eventually became Whole Foods, that's when my eyes opened and saw what the real future of CPG was looking for, which was clean, healthier, better for you. And that's when I really embraced it because, I try to stay active, I try to stay healthy, but a lot of times food, they're not very transparent of what's inside. They're not transparent about what's inside that package, whether it's a Little Debbie's, whether it's a Frito, whether it's whatever brand you want to call out. But the importance of consumers as they look for what's next in their pantry or what goes into their backpack or their purse or their luggage when they travel, it really comes down to, as the last 30 years is really scaled to, impactful ingredients, functional ingredients. Is it better for me, and how is it going to make me feel after I eat it? And that's what I really love about the community that I'm in now. Is all those brands that you listed off. Every one of them was trying to improve a category that they were playing in. They were trying to bring value, incremental value, as well as delight the consumer once they discovered and that's why I'm here. I've been at Everybody Eat for over 6 years. And really, it was started from zero. They had 7 retail doors when I started. So it was really easy to check on execution. And you're only in 7 doors in your neighborhood where you produce. It's as you scale into now almost 44,000 retail doors here at Everybody Eat, it is really comes a challenge to understand the slotting that you paid for, right? The programming that you gave to the distributor to get the product to the shelf, does it end up onto the shelf or does it end up on a pallet of what I call the misfit toys that aren't part of DSD, that is not on the Snyder truck, is not on the Frito truck, and it doesn't necessarily have merchandising oversight and support. And I would recommend, depending on the category or product you play in, merchandising absolutely has value. But for value for high volume, high turn items. For something like, I don't know, just throwing it out there, like a bread mix or, muffin mix, which has less than half a unit per store per week in velocity, would you hire somebody or versus utilizing void reports through your distributors? So I'm just wanting to get that conversation, started, Jordan, because I know that's what seems to be the biggest challenge for brands as they scale. And to your earlier point is how do you know you're on the shelf
It's
and what
it's
tools are available?
yeah, and I think that's something I had experienced myself. both as a founder and then just working in CPG most of my life as well. The solutions, and I'm sure you see that and probably feel this, are very much geared towards benefiting the distributors and benefiting the retailers. A lot of times the brands seem to be treated as interchangeable. The brand on the shelf could be replaced by another brand, or you're out of stock or missing. The retailer knows that that shopper might want, your crackers, but instead they're going to buy someone else's crackers because they want crackers. We we have looked at that problem from every angle, and I think we always come back to this element of like the solutions need to be built for the brand. The brands are the reason shoppers are there. They're not there for the store, the products on the shelf. They're there to find great experiences and try new things and ideally find something they love. I had your cheese list, cheese thins last night actually, so they were delicious. The turnip truck in Nashville, Tennessee, good spot in stock. It was a great one, but the big thing that I think everyone takes advantage of is that brands can be replaced, and so solutions haven't been built for a brand state. When you think about how you're growing Everybody Eat, as well as, I mean, obviously you've done some really big brands in addition to Everybody Eat, Perfect Bar. I mean, just a juggernaut in that space in a unique category. But you've seen that growth curve. How have you tackled that problem and that scale up phase? And then how is that different versus, let's say, where you are with Everybody now versus, let's say, pre-pandemic when you started?
Yeah, I think every I think every brand, whether you're a co-founder or you're a sales lead or a marketing lead, really needs to understand the three key things. It's the consumer, the category, and your competition. Right. And so art and the value that you play within that. And in many ways, if you are another Me Too, if you're just like another brand that's already on shelf, it's really difficult to add that incentive for the grocery manager to put something that is just the same, or the specialty buyer or whoever it might be, the dairy, to put something in there and ensure that it does well when it's not something truly incremental that's bringing value that the customers are going to actively seek and request, right? Two is understanding the category. Does a category warrant having multiple brands in it? Is in beverages. Yes, you could have 30 different brands in a cooler, and every one of them are going to do well as long as it fits some functionality or some attribute to that point. But you don't need 30 different brands of bread.
Yeah, very
You
true.
don't need 30 different brands of crackers. But some brands want them retailers to have 30 brands because that's the only way to getting in. And I think where you separate yourselves, whether you're a refrigerated protein bar that tastes amazing, like Perfect Bar, or you're a functional juice, whether you're Evolution Fresh or Suja or Odwalla, at the end, you have to deliver something to the consumer where they know that's the product that I want. And that is what I'm going to reach for and I'm going to seek. And if the retailer doesn't have it, yeah, I might go from a Evolution Fresh to a Suja or vice versa, depending on the availability. But if there's if my product is not there, the customers that we are all trying to cater to, they know what they want and they will vocalize it and they will speak out, as you know. And so that's where I think brands can do really, really be successful is finding their tribe, finding their consumer, and having them love the brand. So they're actively asking for it. Therefore, you're not, if I still will say if you're a beverage, you need to have DST. You need to have eyes and hands in the cooler. But if you're a snack or you're a cracker that doesn't have the same velocity and benchmarks, but still competitive, you can rely on having a broker network that are your eyes and ears who are in store. And I don't want to always champion the people I work with, but Greenspoons is a fantastic broker partner for brands who believe they can get MULO distribution, but early on, they need to focus on natural and specialty. And they're a great partner. They understand the landscape. They understand who and where and the impact that your brand can have based upon consumer, category, and competition. So I think that's the way I've really looked at it, Jordan. Is every situation is unique. When I was at Odwalla, we had DSD guys in store. We could see it firsthand and understand. And albeit it's 70-day shelf life, you can manage the inventory that's flowing in to help manage through and optimize that drop of that DSD rep, which is very expensive. But
Absolutely.
on the other side, if you're with a brand was Limitless, a lightly caffeinated sparkling water that wasn't DSD, you reaching out to a company like Base Makers or Dirty Hands to be able to be in there to compete against the high touches of the world, and in LA, which they own those coolers. Czar and his team and what they've been able to do. If I'm a beverage and I want to be in LA, I'm definitely reaching out to High Touch. And it's that level. But if you can't afford or you don't have the distribution with High Touch because of the established relationships you already have with with the Cahey's and the UNFI, then relying on someone to get into that store to ensure that you have that off-shelf placement that you're supposed to receive and you pay for, or your fourth SKU, because you don't want your fourth SKU to become the tail. It's available, right? And in many ways, the tail of many brands is because of direct result, not about the product. It's about the distribution and availability.
How does that impact the over? Let's say it's reached that time, you're sitting down with the buyer, you have 4 SKUs. 2 SKUs well executed, higher velocity, high popularity, 2 SKUs that are lower or less managed, and you lose a couple SKUs off the shelf. Like, we see that all the time where he just disappears, right? Like, all of a sudden, it's just not there. How does that impact the discussion with the retailer when it is time to talk about the upcoming set? Are they looking at the aggregate of all SKUs together, or are they just looking at each individual SKU, deciding if they stay in the brand maintains the position, if basics? How is that discussion?
Wow, I wish I could have a moment inside of the mind of our buyers. But what I will say is we're very fortunate. Every one of our buyers that we work for, we do feel like we're partners. And so although when there is an opportunity where an item is becoming a less popular and you've done all the diligence of trying to close those voids, and albeit the voids might be closed, but sales still aren't necessarily hitting the threshold or the benchmark or the lift to get it up to the point versus taking the lift of taking your number one SKU and you improving that by a unit versus improving your fourth SKU by a half a unit is not even apples to apples from an investment standpoint.
Yeah.
Then it becomes your innovation, I would hope, would help to mitigate and manage that loss of pretty much cutting your own tail off. And I think brands have to do that. And if, at least from a retailer's point of view, when a brand comes to the table and says, I recognize and understand the entirety of our partnership, both good performing and opportunistic. And because we have concerns here, before you've made the decision, we're going to make the decision by bringing something that is incremental in value. That's a partnership. And if a retailer sees that from one brand and the brand is not even their top 3 or 4, the expectation at least is you take what you experienced in one meeting and it translates to the next and say, hey, I had the fourth ranked brand in my office and they are already cutting. Why are you telling me to take their number 3 SKU?
Yeah. Nice.
Look at your own portfolio. Are you driving? And I think that's where the conversation becomes, I think, much more beneficial because at the end, if we do our job and the retailer does the job, the consumer wins
Yeah.
and the category grows.
And so I think that's an important point. It seems like your focus has always been consumer first. So
100%.
you view the supply chain as all part of the process, but your focus is always to meet the consumer where they are, to deliver a product that they love. What is that thought process like when you're considering which retailers to target, especially with a kind of a premium mission oriented brand like Everybody Eats, but also still a snack brand? How do you delineate which retailers will have your customers versus which retailers would need to then bring in new customers to kind of build the brand for their chain?
So spins is very helpful. Syndicated data is always helpful. And I would recommend, and this is the category piece, is understanding the category. And then also too is understanding what that specific retailers, what is driving the category growth and what could potentially be actually holding them back. And so that's where we look at it from an opportunistic. What are our peer brands? How are they growing? How are they performing? Attribute wise, just because an attribute is doing really well with one retailer, it may not be doing well with another because that other retailer picked the wrong horse, meaning the wrong brand, and it doesn't deliver as you. And thank you, Jordan, for understanding what it's really been in my career. Is at the end, it's delighting the consumer, right? The consumer, if the consumer is always on top of mind with everything, whether it's the retailer or the supplier or the distributor, they all win. We win, truly. And I think in that point of view, when you evaluate, okay, how is it that we're going to scale and grow with what retailers? Well, the retailers who are asking for 3 cases or $100 or $10,000 a SKU for 100 stores versus a retailer, and most of those are going to be your larger format because it is very competitive, versus a retailer like a Natural Grocers or an NCG or a Whole Foods or even Sprouts. I know people say they're very expensive to work with to scale, but it's to the expense is really about how quickly can you get your brand to be sticky with their customer. If your brand is another Me Too, and you're going to have to do a lot of promotions to get the customer to make that switch, if it's just like another product, to say, you know what, all right, it's the same, but they're always on deal, so I'll buy it. And then once you become a habit and a pantry item, then that's where you can build your flywheel. But we looked at it from, who can we partner with that understands and appreciates what we're doing? The fact that our facility is free from the top 14 food allergens plus corn, there's only one other facility that I'm aware of, and that's River Valley Foods in Canada that makes made good. It is not easy. A lot of the brands that are free from or allergen friendly are co-manned. They are relying on the co-manufacturer to take their wonderful recipe and bring it to market to commercialize it. But when people aren't necessarily in it daily, touching the dough, spreading it, baking it right to the right perfection, there is some hiccups and there are some quality challenges. And even when you're manufacturing yourself, there's some quality challenges, but you know it much sooner and you can pivot much quicker and you don't have 10,000 pounds of it versus you only have a couple 100 pounds of it after you went through that batch. So I hope that answers your question about how and why I pick. It's the category that you're getting into, the product you're getting to. It's innovating on cusp, and sometimes you're delivering what the customer wants, but sometimes it's giving the customer what they don't realize they need.
Yes. Yeah.
Like everybody eat before the consumers, they're like, "Oh, we'll figure it out. We'll work it out. We'll find. That's good enough."
Yeah. Yeah.
What we've shown is once they start discovering us, it's like, wow, I never even knew a brand was like this. I didn't even know you guys existed. And it's that what gives me the excitement of we are doing what the consumer wants, and we'll eventually scale it to the point where the Albertsons of the world, all divisions of Albertsons, all divisions of Kroger, Target, who we're talking to, will say, yeah, we believe it. We believe in you, and we believe in the attributes. We believe in the trends, and our consumers are asking.
So you obviously cut your teeth with a lot of that natural grocery space, which has, I think, really blurred lines of traditional. We had a very clean, I feel like, back in the Whole Foods, 90s, 2000s, early
Yes,
2000s. You knew it was healthy. You knew natural food. You knew the types of foods that would be there versus what would be in your local Kroger or in your mass retailer. That line seems to have blurred heavily. So with a brand like Everybody Eat, which is very mission oriented, product forward, obviously really meticulously made in house, how has that changed the types of retailers you'll work with versus what you probably would have 15 years ago? Would this have been Whole Foods is where we go, this is what we're building, to now you can sell it into Target at the same level of success?
I think it relies on where you are from a COGS standpoint, right? And the capabilities, the manufacturing. Because what you don't want to do is take inventory that was set for your core customers who've been with you for all those years. And then you get the shiny new distribution, whether it's Target, Walmart, or whoever, and they take inventory away. That
Yeah.
is the worst thing you can do. So part of it is understanding what and when to scale is when you're able to deliver, because all the hard work, and it can take up to a year, Jordan, 18 months sometimes to finally get a retailer to say yes. And so in that time frame, you got to believe that at any one of those points, as soon as you said, I'm courting you, I want to do business with you, let's partner, that you, if they come back in 8 weeks and say, yes, we want it, that you can deliver.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that has been a very delicate, especially since we manufacture everything ourselves.
Yeah, that's a tricky balance. Is it something you're building into forecasts 12 months out and assuming
Yes.
some of these? Is that like we have to land some of these big customers because we are ramping up production with that idea? Or is it retroactive of we will be ready in 12 months after we find out the target wants to carry us.
I think it's a little, I hate to be ambiguous on this, but it's a little bit of both. But we do, every brand is should be now planning 2027,
Yeah.
right? And so,
You've
right,
al it's already
and we're already doing that. And so we're also looking at 2028. We're one of the big things that or I shouldn't say we, Trish and Nicole early on, and these are my partners, Trish and Nicole, if anybody's watching the video, they realized early on it wasn't just retail where the families had a hard time and consumers had a hard time finding clean, delicious food. It was food service.
Hmm.
And you think about, in every culture, no matter where you are around the world, there's a bond that happens when people get together and share food, especially with the ones they love. And so when you're out to a restaurant, or you're at a cafe, or you're on a college campus, you're even at the hospital and you have a special diet, it's like, what do I eat? And so it becomes that idea of how do we get people to discover the brand in places outside of retail? And that is what we're really focused our attention on now. Even though with the dynamics and the challenges of retail, it's always going to be there. And to be a CPG brand, you got to be in grocery. But places that we're touching and we're focusing on is in the alternative food service channels. And I think that is the next place where a lot of better for you brands will see significant growth as people are going back in the office, right? Back in 2020, nobody thought of it. In 2022, nobody even thought of it in certain states. But now everyone's back.
Yep. Yeah.
And people, especially the young millennials, they're used to snacking as a meal solution.
Yep. All the
Us guys in mid-50s, I'm sorry, I like my 3, 4 meals a day, you know? So it really is a changing up, but there's more of the youth in office than there are me.
the
And
healthy just seems to have boomed over the last 10 in particular, and all of the options are really interesting to see, and I mentioned on the show occasionally, I'm vegetarian, and so a lot of my snacks lean like, back in the day, I loved beef jerky, right? Like, that was my snack, but it was healthy, it was protein, I was 20-something-year-old athlete, loved it. Now, it's amazing to just see how many variants and niches of snacks that do exist. I can walk in the store and go, "There's vegan jerky, there's edamame there's mung beans, whatever it is." Like, there's so many snack options that even 5 years ago, my options were make a salad, make, my lunch and dinner, and then maybe you can get a perfect bar, or you had some bar. That was the snack for you. And now it's just blowing up. And so you're competing, you're building customers, and you mentioned something I think is really interesting is that it could take up to 18 months to really get a deal across the finish line. When we first spoke, you mentioned this thing, and you said the distribution's 2% of the battle, 98% of its execution. And I know how to navigate this a lot of times. Can you give us an anecdote or a little story about one of those times where the execution wasn't there after landing something significant? And
I hate to. I have a perfect example that just happened. We were in a we went through a packaging change with our cookies. We went from a 5.5 ounce to a 5 ounce, and the reason for it is because of the fact our cost of goods increased. And we figured it'd be better to take a few cookies out and keep the price the same from a consumer. Again, always thinking of the consumer. Well, in a couple of the regions of this retailer, we had voids. And we, fortunately enough, we get scorecards every week from our broker to see. Because of the understanding of anticipating the risk, I think that's a lot of times is, I mean, if you've done this before, you know what's going to potentially happen and not rely being proactive. And by being proactive, we caught it very early on. We communicated to our retailer. They did a forced distro. And then we followed back up with our distributor, say, did you get it email? Did you get that forced issue? Are you implementing it? And then working with our broker and those specific regions to say, hey, by the way, focus on these handful of stores. If these handful of stores have it, then they're all going to get it,
yeah,
is the assumption. And so that's how we were able to implement it. And it really is if you, like I said in the beginning, if you have a partnership with your retailer, they're going to hold you accountable, and you want to have the confidence that you can hold them accountable
absolutely.
and not feel bad about it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of it, it's the consumer. They're not finding the product on shelf. They're not getting the value and deal. They're having to go somewhere else for your product. And it's not a win-win-win experience. So I think when you frame it up in that manner, no matter who you talk to, people are going to want to help to come up with a solution or the resolution versus being very combative and saying this is your fault. What are you doing? And then whereas like, I don't need to deal with another angry or upset supplier.
Yeah.
I'm going to work with a partner.
Yeah, absolutely. We're big, and I've always been a big believer, and obviously with my current company I lead, we really believe that brands do need to own their success. And I've told my companies in the past that nobody will care about your product as much as you and your team. Everyone else goes home at night and they're more thinking about your brand or which stores have missing authorized gaps or why isn't it selling in certain locations. And so our goal is always to let brands have the ability to invest in their success and manage those gaps and voids. And we see, it's hard to believe because I know I've experienced some of it firsthand. I've had a 30% gap in Sprouts at 3 weeks after launch. I've seen it happen myself. We regularly see 8 to 15% of SKUs missing in authorized stores. And I mean, it's just an absurd number if you think about the fact that you've earned that. It's not like something wrong. Typically, you've done everything right and then you find out that you're missing from 15% of the locations. How is that baked into your go-to-market or route to market strategy? Is it something where the goal is 0, or do you have an acceptable level of, "We're just not gonna have 100% execution?"
Wow, that's hard because although I wasn't a straight A student, I tried to get 100% on everything I did.
Yep.
And if you did it, you always want to know what prevented you from getting it, so you understand the answer. And with that, it's I take that same ideology and thought process it in when we get an authorization. It's I expect us to be in every door that you said us to be in, and there is no budget of plus or minus. The budgets of plus or minus 1% is more of trade. What's the trade budget gonna look like? Distribution, when you say you got 1,400 doors in Target, you expect to be in 1,400 doors of Target, and you hold not only yourself, but the team responsible to close those voids, and you create a tracker. Where are we every month? And if it gets to a point of being a little bit of an opportunity that doesn't seem to want to get closed, then maybe you up it up more frequently, or you have the wrong partner.
Yeah.
And that's I will say it's very rare that a retailer says, I'm not interested. Thank you, but not interested in the fact that you're calling out the boys. They're very interested. That shelf space, every inch matters. It's okay. It goes to your point. The retailer says, what are you going? I did what I was supposed to do. I told the distributor, I told the stores, I did the planogram, I got your tags. The fact that it's not coming from the back room to the front room, I might need your help, brand. What can you do to help with that? Versus just relying on me. And I think that if you take it and you both own the opportunity, I think the chances of closing it are much greater than saying, I did my job and I sent the email.
That definitely makes a ton of sense. And Matt, I really appreciate your time so far today and just letting us take a look back at your history and everything you've understood about the CPG world and everything you're still encountering building Everybody Eats. One question I love to ask everybody on the show before we sign off: what advice would you give to a CPG founder who just landed their first big distribution? They might not have any experience yet. It's that, hey, I was doing 7 stores locally, but I just got the call from Wegmans. I just got the call from Target. What advice would you give them before saying yes?
Understand the investment it's going to take to create the awareness with your target consumer, that some people call the tribe, where they will love you and buy you at the threshold that you're going to need to continue to be successful. So you don't need to look at your own brand to cut. So that's a lot in that sentence. However, I think the founder will understand, or the sales or the marketing team will understand that although Whole Foods or Wegmans can't champion and be the entirety of your brand, they are such an integral block to build your foundation. And the investments it's going to take early on is going to be more than what people or any model will tell you. It's future value, and really understand that. Unless you're a unicorn and have a very unique situation where you have pixie dust that costs you 25 cents and you can get $7 for it.
Yeah.
That's rare.
Yeah.
And so it really is understanding how much investment dollars is this retailer going to take for me to make the impact that I feel that we can deliver, so that then you have the next retailer that comes on board, the next distribution isn't a surprise, it's planned because you've shown your success.
No, that's a great point. I think that's something everybody needs to factor in because it's the most exciting moment and probably the most terrifying moment when you do find out that you've actually landed a national one. You've actually landed 1,000 doors and you don't know where the funding is going to come from and how much it's going to cost to execute. But I do think that's a great perspective to have. And Matt, thank you again for sharing all of your experiences and insights on the show with us today. And for everyone listening, that's a wrap. If anything we talked about sounds familiar, flat velocity, distribution voids, gaps in the planogram, visit us at shopwitheileen.com. We'll check out some stores for you for free, hopefully get you eyes on the shelf and make your life a little bit less stressful so you can focus on doing what you do best, which is, like Matt says, delighting your customer and meeting them where they are. So thank you again. And as always, know thy shelf.